before I begin, I just wanted to just shortly thank just a few people, especially Mrs. Harvey, our principal, and in that third pew are the teachers and the sisters. You know, they teach as hard and maybe even harder than those in public school, but they get a whole lot less. So thank you for your sacrifices, teachers. Thank you, and sisters. And parents that are making the sacrifices to send your children to Catholic school, I know it hurts. It hurts. There's no question about it. It's tough to put that in, month out. But it may be, my friends, the greatest investment you will ever make. It may be the greatest investment you will ever make. You are investing in the treasures of your life, your children. Don't ever forget, my friends, it's an investment you will never, ever regret in the years to come. There's a true story of a young man that was involved quite heavily in the church. It was a Lutheran church called Christ the Lord. And he was running some sort of volunteer program. And they were doing something at church, and he said, I can't work that day, or I can't volunteer on Saturday. I'm doing something with my buddy. And his phone wasn't working, so he gave him the phone of his buddy. And earlier in the day, the two were talking about how his friend was saying that he didn't really want anything to do with going to church, and really he's gotten past religion. But the church called his friend, and on his phone, what came up was Christ the Lord. And it kind of shook him up. He looked at his phone and showed his friend, and he said, answer it. He said, no, I'm not answering that. But his friend never told him that it was this church that was calling him, and he actually thought, and it was a real wake-up for him. It kind of turned his life around, but interesting, isn't it? True story. But my friends, this gospel, the last part of it talks about fishermen, but really it talks about being the disciples. And all of us are called to be that. Every one of us are called to be a disciple. And I like to just list 3 little qualities of what it means to be a disciple and how we should apply those into our lives. There was a woman called Maria Agnesi. Any of you ever heard of Maria Agnesi? Some of you math people might have heard of her because she did some tremendous groundwork. She was born in 1718. By the age of 11, now she could speak, she was born and raised in Italy, so she could obviously speak Italian. But by 11, she could speak fluently French, Latin, German, Greek, Hebrew, and Spanish by the age of 11. By the age of 14, she was really composing math books and textbooks. And so by the time she was in her later teens, all the major universities in Europe wanted her to teach and be part of it. For the most part, she refused, and she was a very devout Catholic. Even the Pope wanted her to work in one of the things, and she said no. And for 40 years, she started and founded a hospital for the poor in Milan. But she said, in life, we all want things. And she said, we all need things. She said, but a question we don't always ask is, what does God want of me? What does he want? What does he need me to do? And we don't often ask that question, and we'll never ever be satisfied in our life until we do answer that question. For all of us, what does God want me to do? It's a simple little question, my friends, but we need to ask it. We need to ask it. That's the first thing. What does God want? I don't really follow professional baseball. I'd rather watch something a little more exciting like golf. It's pathetic how we are, aren't we? But in any event, in the early 90s, there was a player for the San Francisco Giants named Brett Butler. Some of you baseball fans might have heard of him. He was beloved at San Francisco, And then he was a free agent, and the LA Dodgers picked him up for a much higher salary. And apparently those two teams are very competitive, the LA Dodgers and the Giants. And later in the season, it was the first time Brett Butler was back at the San Francisco Giants Stadium. And when he walked out in the field, he got a standing ovation because they loved him. But he did something unique. When he was out in the field, he came running back in and gave his manager of the LA Dodgers, Tommy Lasorda, a big hug. And those cheers turned into jeers and boos. And they asked him after the game, they said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "I wanted them to know that I'm no longer a Giant, but I'm a Dodger." And they said, "Was that tough to do?" He said, "Yeah, it was." He said, "But it needed to be done." You know, my friends, as Catholics, sometimes we need to take a stand, don't we? We need to make a statement. And we so hesitate to do that in today's world. But we need to do that. We need to do that. The second criteria of a disciple, making a statement in our life. And the third is Dr. Richard Dawson was in World War I in a Japanese prison camp. And he watched his fellow soldiers, prisoners, dying, and what it was a very treatable disease, but they were being contaminated by the water and the rivers and swamps around the area, which were heavily infected with all sorts of diseases and infections. But they would get a little stomach virus, and normally it's very treatable out in the world, but in a prison camp, it's deadly because they can't really treat it, and then they just die of dehydration and all sorts of things from that. But he noticed along the swamps and the rivers were these coconut trees. So he would knock those coconuts down, cut them open, and in the coconut itself is this very sterile water. And so he would have these inmates and prisoners drink that sterile water and the inside of a coconut, and it would sterilize them. It would sterilize them. And he said he was amazed at the fact that here these coconuts that were saving these people's lives were right along the swamps and the rivers. And he said, I was wondering how that could happen, but those trees were smart enough to dig their roots deeper, so they took that water in that wasn't affected like the surface stuff. And the one who wrote the article said, you know, in the world today, there's so many things that affect us and can contaminate us in the world, and we know that. What do we do about it? We need to drink that pure coconut. And what is that? We come here to church and receive our living God, don't we? Our living God, my friends, helps us fight against the influences and the negativity of the culture itself. And so today, as we begin this new week, my friends, it's good for all of us. We need to be good disciples, don't we? We need to come here to church on a faithful basis to receive our living God. We need to make a statement every now and then, don't we? All of us. And we need to ask in our life, what does God want me to do? God bless you.